Hi everyone, it's Caroline or Miss B Overseas. Thanks so much for clicking on this video. It has been a minute since maybe you've clicked on a video because it's been a while since I've filmed anything. I haven't posted anything in a while because I haven't filmed anything in a while because I haven't read anything in a while. So when you have a channel that's centered around books and reading, but you're not reading anything, there's not a whole lot to film. I have no explanation for why I haven't been reading other than I'm in what I'm calling like a slump within a slump. You know how they have those books that are like, it's a book within a book or like a movie within a movie and X, Y, and Z. I am currently in the middle of like a month and a half long reading slump that is in the midst of a year long reading slump, which is the year of reading of 2021. I've talked about this before. I feel like I am not alone. I know that I'm not alone when I say that 2021, the reads just aren't hitting like they normally do. The only explanation that I can really think of for why this year of reading is going so poorly is that I am someone who views reading as a form of escape. In past years, my whole life really, I've gone to books when I've needed an escape from reality, and that's like a learned coping mechanism, and I know that I am not the only one that does that as well. And so this year has been a hard year where I've really needed to turn to books as coping mechanisms, but for whatever reason, I am not getting that same sense of escapism from any of the books that I have been reading. And I know for a fact that it is not always the books themselves. Some of it may just be I'm picking up more duds than normal this year, but some of the books I read and I know that, like for example, if I would have read them last year, I would be enjoying them so much more. But my focus with books, for whatever reason, I am just not allowing myself to get lost in any kind of story. So anyways, if you were looking for an explanation as to like why I've been in a slump, you weren't, but maybe I was, and maybe I needed that little tangent. So hopefully that gives some sort of explanation or maybe even like validation if you are going through something similar. Anyways, moving on from that, I wanted to do some kind of update because I have read some things, so I want to talk about that. I've also hauled some things, so I want to talk about that. And then I also am planning on reading some things before the year wraps up, so I want to talk about those as well. So I could be wrong. Let me pull up Goodreads really quick. But I believe that throughout the entirety of the months of October and November, I only completed 2 books. Actually, no. Okay, Goodreads proved me wrong. I completed 4 books. 2 of them were In My Dreams I Hold a Knife and then How to Pronounce Knife, which is a short story collection. Both of those I read in a reading vlog where I read books that had knife in the title. I'll link it up here and down there if you're interested. There are 2 more books that I have read and not mentioned in videos. The first one that I think we should talk about is The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharpe. This is a young adult, gritty, thriller-esque contemporary. The basic premise or setup for this, we're following a young teenage girl who at the very beginning, she's going to a bank to deposit some cash, and she's with her current girlfriend and then also her ex-boyfriend, but there's a little bit of drama because the ex-boyfriend did not know that her and this girl were dating, and they all 3 are like best friends. So her main concern at the beginning of the book is just getting through this bank interaction with the both of them. Little does she know that once they are all 3 at the bank, they would end up becoming involved in this bank robbery. Really, this book is like one part survival and escape, but then also it's kind of a really deep dive character study on this main girl because we get flashbacks to different points in her life because her biological mother is a con woman, and she throughout her childhood was involved in her mother's cons. So we kind of flash backwards to all the different identities that she's had and all the different girls she's been, but then we also get this kind of like high stakes situation in the present where it really does a deep dive into how that past trauma is affecting her right now. This just did so many things right and so many things that I love in YA. Focusing on a group, like these 3 teenagers, and I love kind of a group dynamic. In young adult in particular, it just works really well for me. Also kind of the flashbacks in time and then discovering how that's affecting in the present, I really liked and appreciated. Also just kind of the methodical intricacies that we get into this main girl's mind. The chapters count down or count up. They kind of have timestamps, and then it says like 78 minutes captive. And then one thing that you also get to see at some of the beginning chapter headings is kind of her plan. Like she's obtaining all of these materials that she thinks will be helpful in this like escape plan. So you kind of get to see the intricacies and like trying to outwit and outsmart and find her way out. And in a year of reading that has been so difficult, this is one that I found a lot of enjoyment out of. And so if I were star rating books, I don't even know if I am anymore, but this would like most likely get a 5 stars from me. Another book that I have read in its entirety that I haven't talked about here yet is Before the Ever After by Jacqueline Woodson. This is a middle grade. It's written in the style of verse that only Jacqueline Woodson can accomplish, and it focuses on this young boy and the relationship he has with many different people, but primarily his father. And his father is a NFL player. He was a star NFL player who is experiencing a head injury. So he's kind of going through memory loss, and it's really just an account of a son observing how he is losing his father. It's stunning, it's heartbreaking, it's beautiful. It does everything that like a typical Jacqueline Woodson book does, where it has this beautiful writing and also these really heartwarming and vibrant characters that have just these stunning relationships with one another. One of my favorite things was the young boy and the relationship that he had with his friends. They were all quite young, but just the way that they supported one another throughout this was really, really beautiful. Jacqueline Woodson is always good about bringing up these topics, and particularly topics that you don't necessarily see a whole lot, especially in like middle grade and young adult literature. This book is set a while ago, like in the 90s, I think, where professional athletes getting traumatic head injuries, like there was the stigma around it and it wasn't really talked about. And so this was just kind of like right at that precipice, and how it really is such a huge societal issue. And so it got brought up in that way, and it was just something that was really intriguing and interesting to read about, but still really beautifully and masterfully done. And so as always, I loved it. I can't imagine that I'll ever read a Jacqueline Woodson that I don't love, and so I can't really see why I would give this anything other than 5 stars. I'm not even going to attempt to tell you all of the books that I have like started and then DNF'd like temporarily or permanently. There was a moment at the beginning of November where I was just trying to really beat myself out of this slump, and the way that I was doing that was I was picking up just pretty much any book that I could find. So I started, I think, at least 5 or 6 different books that I just like put down and haven't thought about since. But there are 2 that I am a significant way into that I hope to God that I finish them. One of them is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. I have been switching back and forth between the audiobook and then physically reading this. I don't even know if I should like really wrap this up yet. I still have like 150 or so pages left, but in a 600-page book, so I have read a significant amount of it. We get flash like forwards, I guess, like present timeline and then historical timeline, and it's all surrounding this Brookhaus school for girls that is this like gothic sort of ethereal haunted school. There were a string of deaths that took place at that school in like history, and then it got shut down. And then in the present day timeline, there are a bunch of people coming together to kind of go back to this Brookhaus school for girls to film the story. It's something that I am surprised by because I am enjoying it. It is just so long, and as we know, I am in my slump within a slump, so I never really have any desire to pick it up. but when I am reading it, I am intrigued by it. The writing style is very interesting. It's a little bit mixed media in that we get some illustrations throughout. Emily M. Danforth uses like footnotes a lot in it. And then there's just like some script and like conversational excerpts and things like that. I'm also reading this like for a particular video that I'm really hoping that I get the chance to film before the end of the year. So hopefully I can power through these last 150 pages before the end of the year so I can get that video filmed. And then the second one is another middle grade. This one I actually picked up from my school's library this week when I took my students to the library and they were browsing. It was something that the cover and the inside flap caused me to pick it up. I had never heard of it before. It's called Found Things by Marilyn Hilton, and this cover is just really beautiful to me. I'll go ahead and read you a little bit of the inside cover so you can see like what drew me into it. River Rose Byrne has found many things. Glass pieces brushed soft by water and sand, a tiny ring with a deep green stone, a strange new friend named Meadow Lark. I like couldn't not pick this up with the two main girls being named River and Meadow. But there are many things that she's still searching for. Her missing brother, Theron, Meadowlark's vanished bird, Mr. Trix, and the meaning of the familiar house that her mind explores when it wanders. I'm not that far into it and it's not that long of a book, so I think so far it's like pretty accurate to the synopsis. It's very intriguing to be in this young girl's head. We do get like a first person perspective and she has very much been affected in her mind by the disappearance of her older brother. There's some stuff that we don't know yet, but I just know that it is going to be heartbreaking. And this author's writing style is so gorgeous. It reads like poetry almost, and so I'm interested to see, well, I'm interested in finishing this, and then after I finish it, I'm really interested to see if Marilyn Hilton has any other books, because the writing style is just one that I really love. Okay, so we've talked about everything that I have been reading. Let's talk about some books that I haven't read yet, but I hauled. Another coping mechanism that I went through in order to like push myself out of this slump. It was unsuccessful, much like me starting a bunch of books and then not continuing in them. I went to a bookstore and I just bought, like I had like a blackout and I just like bought a bunch of books. Whether or not I'll actually get to them in a reasonable amount of time remains to be seen. The first one is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is actually one of the books that I got about 30 pages into, and then I was enjoying it and then I put it down and I haven't picked it back up since. It's an extremely popular book, I think particularly now because there's a TV show coming out about it. Also, this is a book that revolves very heavily around a flu-like pandemic, and I believe that we get several like flashbacks and present and then flash forwards in time. So we get like pre-pandemic, during the pandemic, and then post-pandemic as well. And I think it's centering around this group of characters who they all find each other after or during the pandemic, and they form this kind of like traveling Shakespeare performing troupe. So I'm interested in reading it. I have started reading it, and hopefully at some point in my life I will finish reading this as well. The second book that I hauled really was for my classroom, but it's also for me as well. It's a collection of short stories, I think, called Ancestor Approved Intertribal Stories for Kids. There are about, let's see, 1, 2, 14, 15, 16. There are 16 authors. They're all Indigenous authors, and I think that they are just writing different stories that center around their experiences. They're all stories like centering around children or for children. There's definitely authors here that I know and love: Rebecca Roanhorse, Tim Tingle, Joseph Brucock. That's, I think, it actually. I love picking up short stories and putting them in my classroom, using them in my classroom. But one of the primary reasons why I love short story collections is because it exposes me to new authors. So hopefully by reading this, I'll find some authors that I'm interested in and then can pick up more from them as well. Okay, the next two I really cannot be held responsible for because they're cover buys primarily. The first one is We Begin at the End by Whitaker. The cover I do actually really enjoy. I love the colors and like the bold typeface. Also the title, We Begin at the End, like does things to me. I won't explain what I mean by that because I can't. I've seen this sprinkled throughout social media, but I don't know what it's about, but I do get the sense that it destroys people. I think with like the title and then what the little I've heard about it, I think that it's very emotionally draining and damaging. The blurb says there are two kinds of families, the ones we are born into and the ones we create. So maybe it's like family dynamic interconnectedness, which is something that points to me enjoying it. I also think that this is categorized as a thriller. And one of the things that I've learned this year is that maybe I have the potential to enjoy adult thrillers if I pick up the right ones, and maybe this will be the right one for me. And then the last book that I hauled that was a complete cover purchase is I Love You, But I've Chosen Darkness. Also, both of these cover plus title combined purchases. So I love the sound of this title. I do know that it's about motherhood, I think new motherhood, and the complicated relationship with that. I'll read you the quick like blurb. A furious, hilarious, soul-rending novel of one woman's reckoning with marriage, work, sex, and motherhood. Oh, also, okay, another reason, okay, I remember now. Another reason why I picked this up is it's a desert setting, and I do very much love a desert setting, no matter the genre. Fantasy, love a desert fantasy. Love a contemporary, I guess, set in a desert as well. Any kind of like historical elements that take place in deserts, I really love. I don't know that I've ever read a sci-fi that's set in a desert, but if you know any desert sci-fis, let me know, because I think like a desert setting is just one like I'm drawn to. And then I guess the last thing that I want to talk to you about is I can't even call it a TBR because I'm not going to, just with like the way my reading has been, it doesn't make any sense to me to plan a TBR because I know that I most likely am not going to be reading those books. But there are two books in particular that I would really like to start and finish before the end of the year. They're two of the most random books that I can think of. The first one is We Free the Stars by Hafsah Faizal. This is the second in the duology. It follows the first one, We Hunt the Flame, that I picked up earlier this year and I loved. And this, actually, speaking of desert, it's a desert fantasy. It's kind of like an Arab-inspired fantasy kingdom world. Its primary two characters are like a girl who's trying to save her village, and then this like dark prince who's hunting kind of this same ancient artifact that the girl is hunting, and so they're kind of like hunting each other and hunting the artifact. They end up winding together, and it's excellent, fantastic. So the second in the duology, I really just want to finish this duology by the end of the year because I just need to know what's gonna happen to these characters. I'm also buddy reading this with a friend, Lindsay. She's the one who got me to pick up We Hunt the Flame in the first place. So we're gonna finish out this duology together and we're just going to be destroyed by it the entire time. And then the second book that I need to pick up and read by the end of the year is also for a video that I'm not going to explain, but I'm so close to finishing my TBR for this video, so I'm really committed to reading it. It's called Kent State, 4 Dead in Ohio by Durf Back Durf. It's in graphic novel format and it just tells the historical event of the Kent State shooting, which I don't know anything about, but I'm planning on learning a lot more about it when I read that book. And that, my friends, is really everything that I can think to tell you about my reading life as of lately. Thank you so much for sitting through what I'm sure was a rambling and winding video. I guess if you want to tell me anything, tell me something that you've been enjoying lately. One of the things that like spurs me on in my reading is hearing like positive experiences that other people have been having with reading, because it reminds me like, oh yeah, I can do that too. So I would love to hear yours as well. As always, really genuinely and truly, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you're having a fantastic day, night, evening, wherever you are, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye.